As you've seen, Anatomage offers a wide variety of tools and structures that are available to view within table. And we have different types of manipulation with the clipping tool and the drawing tool, pen tool, all these great things to help you learn anatomy. But to actually assess your students, you wouldn't want to give away the answer. You've probably noticed that clicking on any part of the cadaver will tell you what that part is as a sort of instructional guide. And you wouldn't want your students to be able to do that during a sort of an assessment. So what tools does Anatomage offer for you to be able to do that? We have two main ways of going about assessing students using the feature lock tool, which is present in the settings. The settings is the gear icon right above the home icon on your Anatomage table, and the quiz mode tool, which is represented by the flashcards. And these are the menus that are brought up when you go into the feature lock or quiz mode. So we're going to start off talking about feature lock. And to use feature lock, you're going to be creating your presets first. So a preset can be anything that you are able to customize and design on the table. And that could include using flat colors to color specific parts of the bone, using pins to identify certain structures you'd like students to associate with, the pin numbers there, or having custom annotations as well. As you can see, I've written certain annotations and added them that don't just say the name of the structure, but also maybe ask something different, like name the 3 origins present on this structure. And you can save any of these views as a preset using the 1, 2, 3, 4 icon that's present at the bottom of your table. And once you've created your preset, you can then use feature lock to where the students will only have a certain amount of options available to them when viewing the preset. So how to access the feature lock, you would go to the settings, which is the gear icon right above the home icon. In the feature lock section, which is present in the middle of the settings menu, you can click options, which will then bring up a list of features that you can either check on or off. Checking on one of these features means that the student is able to use that feature during the feature lock. So if none of these are checked on, the student probably won't be able to do very much. But if you check on things like image control, they're able to manipulate and move around the certain structure you have. They could place pins on different locations. They could use the cutting tools. They could take screenshots. So it's really up to you what you'd like your students to be able to use. Once you've clicked the certain features you'd like available, you can then click the red X. You would then tap enable, which is present right next to the options button. And once you tap enable, you'll be prompted with a menu to create a password. So please remember to write this password down somewhere or use a password that you're very familiar with, because if you don't remember your password and you try to disable feature lock later on, you won't be able to access any of the options in that you haven't allowed to use during feature lock, and you won't be able to access the home icon to exit the application. So you'd have to Control Alt Delete or use a different way of closing the program to open it up again. So depending on your presets, you can enable feature lock and they can go through the assessment. Once the assessment is complete, you can click enable again in the settings menu to then disable feature lock after entering your password again. So those are the step-by-step guide of enabling feature lock for something you create using the presets on your table. Quiz mode takes an alternative approach where you can create your presets within quiz mode and then have a sort of structure to the questions you're asking. So once you click on the flashcards icon at the bottom, you'll be presented with a default quiz. And so the default quiz will present any certain structures that are immediately visible on the table as the quiz questions. For example, if I have just the skull available and I click the flashcards icon, I'll be presented with a quiz of the frontal bone and the additional 65 structures present in the skull. So I have 66 questions total. From there, you can customize the type of quiz. We have 4 options available: the pick me type, the flashcards type, multiple choice, and highlight. We'll go into examples later of exactly how these work, but in general, pick me is where you are able to select a structure, or you're told to identify a structure by tapping on the table, and you are not told whether you've selected the correct structure or not. Flashcards, you're told to identify the structure, and then when you do select a structure, you're told if you're correct. Multiple choice presents you with a list of different structures, and you select one, and you're not told if you're correct or not. For the highlight option, it just highlights the structure visible, but doesn't identify or name what that is. And so it's useful for review sessions, especially led by a TA. In addition to the quiz type, you can also put in the student names. And in order to do that, you would need a text file or a CSV file that lists the student names. And we can also go into an example of how to do that. So that's the default quiz option. You can edit the quiz in some of the settings option in this window here. If you click edit, this menu will pop up. And here you have some customizability as well, where you are able to use certain features. There's a mini feature lock available. You could allow the student to have image control, use the structure slider bars, or cutting. Whatever you check is whatever they can do. You could have some general rules about repeating any questions that they skip, randomize the order of the questions, or specify the types of highlight colors you'd like to see using the highlight quiz or the highlight quiz type. You can control the timing, specifically the timing per question and the total time allotted for the quiz. You can also alter how the quiz is scored. So if you'd like to penalize for negative points, or you'd like to reward some points for any question skipped, that option is available as well. And you can display both the timer and the score on the table. So in addition to the settings, we have the main feature of quiz mode, where you're able to customize your quiz. So when you click customize, it'll bring up a menu that is very similar to the visibility icon represented by the eyeball at the bottom. And the main difference you might notice here is that there's a section on the left called views, which is where you'll be creating your views on the table and adding to this section. And so you will be creating a view. For example, I have the top half of the cranium here. I've set the frontal bone red. I've pinned the left parietal bone, and I've made the maxilla transparent. And so I'm able to alter this view any way I like. I can add in these sort of customizations, and whatever structures I'd like the student to be quizzed on, I would add to the quiz by clicking this plus sign here. And so these 7 bones here will be prompted to the student later on how to, the student later will be prompted to identify these structures because I've clicked this plus sign here. And so really you are able to present any sort of view you like, and you are able to ask about any of the visible bones in that view, or the visible structures in that view. So you would then add that view to your quiz by clicking the plus sign next to add to quiz. You can go ahead and repeat that step, adding as many views and as many structures as you'd like. You can see here I've have a view of the spine and the thoracic cage. And have all these annotations here as the listed questions that will be tested for my students. And then after you add all the views you want, you add all the structures you'd like to be in the quiz, you press the continue button here, and you'll be prompted again to customize some final options about your quiz. Here, you're able to rename the quiz. You can choose the quiz type. You're able to add the list of students if you didn't have the chance to add it before. And you are able to now save your quiz. So you can click the save button and you'll be prompted with these three options here on the right. Quiz history is a very quick option if you don't want to create a folder or you don't want to export it somewhere, and it holds just quizzes. So you can save to quiz history and you'll be able to load it up later. You can export your quiz to a different location on your computer, or you could create and add this quiz to a folder that's internal to the software. And once you're done saving your quiz, you can click finish, and you should be able to bring up this quiz again after creating it. And so you'll be prompted by this menu once more, and you can load in your previous quiz and press start, and you're able to change the quiz type in the meantime as well. And so if you wanted to, you could customize that old quiz or a different quiz and edit it even further. So you have a lot of options in that way. So the game type that you see is next to the quiz option here. Quiz mode game type will allow you to play the quiz in a Jeopardy style format. So you can select the number of players. I believe the maximum number of players is 8. So you could have 8 people sitting around the table. And when you start the game mode quiz, you'll be prompted with these text boxes, and whoever clicks answer first will then have the chance to select the structure first. And there's some limited tool options here at the bottom, such as the slider bar. And so that's a fun way to review, and maybe you could add a competitive aspect into the classroom using the game type quiz mode. So there's some logistics to think about depending on the size of your class and how many tables you have. If you have a small class, you can use a single table to assess each student as they take turns taking a long form type of test or quiz over a specific part of the body. You can also use game mode for students to compete during review sessions. If you have larger classes, one option is you could either connect the table to multiple monitors, or you can make screenshots of the table and then display those screenshots on the monitors and have the students look at the table through there. Another idea is that students can vote while the instructor is presenting questions in a quiz, for example, the multiple choice type option, and that could be sort of like a poll.ev way of using the table where you're able to get a collective sense of how well the class knows the material you're trying to teach them, especially in active learning classrooms where it's more about teacher-student interaction rather than just lecturing and going off of a textbook. So I'd like to go ahead and present some scenarios where you might like to use feature lock or quiz mode. For example, if you have a midterm or final exam over a specific part of the body, you could use quiz mode to perform the assessment. And here's just some recommendations about how you would like to customize that quiz mode. For everyone's knowledge, the attachment available on the session is this slide deck. So I have the instructional guide by guide on how to create the quiz mode or use feature lock. And I also have these scenarios there for you if you'd like some ideas or ways of customizing your quiz. So use quiz mode. You could use as many views as you'd like with multiple questions per view. You could enable image control while disabling slider bar and cutting, and you could have a total of 20 minutes to 60 minutes available depending on the size of your class and how much material you'd like to present. So that's one scenario where you could use the table for assessment there. Another one, a lab practical, which I'm sort of familiar with by I got my bachelor's degree in chemistry, so I'm not an anatomist, but I did take anatomy classes, and one of the most foundational things were the lab practicals, where we would walk around and we would look at these pro sections that our instructors and TAs had set out for us to identify structures that were pinned on those pro sections. And so you could recreate that using the table. So you could use quiz mode, and you could have the type be the highlight type of quiz, and you can have one view per question if that's how you'd like your lab practicals to be. I know I had 20 pro sections and 20 questions to answer when I was walking around in my lab practicals at school. And you wouldn't have any of the controls available for them if you wanted to simulate them using just their eyes to try and identify a structure. So you would have to create the view in a specific way that you'd like your students to be able to recognize those structures. You could have 30 questions per 30 seconds per question, and you could enable scoring as well. If you wanted, excuse me, if you wanted to use feature lock for the lab practical, you could, provide your students with a worksheet and only allow these specific controls, the image control and the presets. So they could switch between the different presets while being able to move around the image to see the different pins that you're putting on. And they should be able to identify the structures just based on the view you provided them. So that's another way of performing a lab practical using feature lock. Another scenario, this isn't necessarily an assessment where someone would be graded, but you could set up a sort of guided exploratory dissection where you're able to have the full cadaver and try to recreate a dissection lab as closely as possible. And you would only allow certain features enabled using feature lock. That includes the image control, measurements, and cutting. And so they're able to make that initial dissection into the cadaver, remove specific parts of the skeletal and muscle systems to identify any structures you'd like them to go ahead and try and identify through that dissection. And finally, you could set up a sort of group review session. This would be nice to have your TA lead, especially, where you have a quiz mode that's just the highlight type. And so you'll be going through the different structures and they won't be prompted to pick the structure based on name, but they have to name the structure based on what's highlighted. You would only have one view if you'd like, and they could have all the control available to them, the cutting, the image control, and the slider bars, and you wouldn't need to time and you wouldn't need to score your students. So those are 5 scenarios I've came up with and put in this slide deck. I'm very certain that you can collaborate with other teachers to come up with other scenarios, and that different ways of assessment have been provided throughout UGM as well. And now we're just going to go ahead and I'll go and recreate those steps using the table software. I've chosen to do a lab practical of the human heart, and this is a high-res regional. You can find the high-res regionals in this section right next to gross anatomy, and I've selected the male heart right here. And so I've cleared a few structures. I removed the epicardium and I've added the coronary arteries and the cardiac veins. And so let's say I want to set up my lab practical using feature lock. So it's going to be relatively straightforward. first I'd like to pin certain structures on my cadaver in table. So I'll go ahead and select the pin tool. And when using the pin tool, you can select the type of design or pin you'd like to use. And the number here tells you what number will be on the pin when you place it. So I'll go ahead and click somewhere on the structure. Let's say I'll just click on the on this artery here. So if I want to zoom in, and I'll click on this artery here, and you'll have your pin pop up. If you haven't seen the pin tool used in action, the yellow ball allows you to spin the pin around, while clicking on the or tapping on the red box will allow you to translate the pin through the table space. So you're gonna have to, manipulate your view a bit to make sure you're getting it exactly where you want. But I think, sorry, oh, that was supposed to happen. Remove that. Let's go right there. I think I've got it. So I think I've pinned that artery. And so whenever you're done setting up a pin, you can click on the pin model again, and it'll deselect the current one you have. And now you're able to put in a different one. So I've clicked somewhere on the structure and I've created pin number 2. And let's say I'll just put it in this artery here. And once I'm done, I'll click the pin model again. It automatically goes to pin number 3 for me. And I'll just put that pin somewhere here. So I've pinned my model the way I want. And now I'm going to save this view as a preset. And we'll go to this 1, 2, 3, 4 button at the bottom. And you'll be presented with this presets menu here. And so to add my current view as a preset, I'm going to click the plus sign button right here. You'll be prompted with a save preset menu, and you can name the preset. I'll just name it 1, and there we go. So I'm able to click on the image itself or click on the 1, and we'll see the distinction between those later. So I'll go ahead and clear my pins by pressing delete all in the pin menu, and I'm going to create another view to add to my presets. So I'll just spin around. Let's say I want to pin the structures here. I can also highlight the structures directly if I'd like. So I can click here, and let's say I want to create a view where I'm, instead of applying a flat color, I can use the action menu, and I'll just do, this is green. The inferior vena cava, we can have it as blue, and we can have this structure here, the ascending aorta, as red. So if I want this to be the view, I can go ahead and do that, and then add that to my presets menu by clicking the plus sign again and saving the preset as the second one. And so now if I click on 1, it'll switch to that image again. I click on 2, it'll switch to that image. So you're able to quickly go through your presets as long as you add them. So I made sure to add my second preset before I clicked on 1 because I didn't want to erase any of the work I did. So let's just do one more really quickly. Let's go here again. Let's remove all the pins. And let's say I want to add these custom annotations I had mentioned before. So I'll go ahead and click on a structure. I'll go to the visibility menu, and I'm currently on the right atrium. So I'm trying to manipulate these menus on this small screen. And so I'm looking at the right atrium, and I can click this green button at the bottom, this green A, and it will pull up the available annotations for that structure. I go ahead and press the down menu, and you can see I've already created an annotation here. What great vessel enters here. So that's an option. I can also click add new annotation, and I'll be prompted to enter some text. What is this structure? And if I save that, I'll be prompted to press OK and then select the location of the annotation. So if I click here, I have that custom annotation now binded and attached directly to the right atrium. I could have clicked anywhere on the heart and the annotation would have been put there, but it would have been associated only with the right atrium. And so that wouldn't have made sense if I didn't click on the right atrium. So that's one way of adding your custom annotation there. You can also do the same thing for the left atrium. You can spin that around and you can click add and you can write anything you want here. So what is this structure? And this is the advantage that feature lock and presets has over quiz mode, as you'll see later. So I'm asked to click that. There you go. So I've clicked on the left atrium. And finally, we'll just do the left ventricle. And I already have an annotation there. So I'll just click that. And I'll exit out of the visibility menu. So here are all my structures. And I'll add that to the presets. So I have all three of my views and I can switch between them relatively easily. If I want to save all of these views for later use, I'm going to click on the numbers and you'll see that the options on the right have become non-highlighted. And so I can either choose to export these presets as a VPF, or I could add the presets to a previous folder I've made. You can create a folder by clicking this folder button. I already have a folder named Heart Presets. And click the plus button here, name my folder, put in a folder pin. A folder pin is, like a password, so that if you're trying to create a quiz or a midterm, you don't want students who are just studying to go ahead and see what the presets you've made by exploring through the folders in your preset option. So I'll go ahead and just add these presets to a folder. I'll add it to my heart presets and I can name it quiz 2. And once I do that, I have saved my presets. I'll then go ahead and enable feature lock finally. So I go to the gear icon here. I go to the options menu here, and you can see I have image control and presets enabled. So once I'm ready, I'm going to enable feature lock, create a short password here. And now you can see I'm able to manipulate the structure and move it around. I can access the presets menu and I can alt and go through each of the images, but I cannot add or import any of the different presets that might have been made previously. So they're only able to go through the different presets, not actually add or import anything else. And you see, if I try to click on something different here, I'll be prompted with this warning: Anatomage table application must be unlocked to use this feature. Try to go to the cutting tool, not available. These little options here are part of the image control, so they're still available. But I'll go ahead and just undo that. So go to my first preset. There you go. And so whenever you're ready, the assessment's complete. They have this worksheet. They've gone through the questions. You can disable feature lock again, and you should have access to everything again. I'll go ahead and try and recreate the lab practical through the quiz mode option. So I'll go ahead and clear my current view, and I'm going to click the flashcards icon at the bottom and bring this menu up. So you'll see that the default structures have been filled in already. I have these 44 questions that are apparent. I have this title, left common carotid artery plus 43 structures. And here I can add in the student name. So you see if I click on this little menu here, nothing really happens. The drop-down arrow doesn't show a name because no names have been inserted. So if I click the plus sign, I'll be prompted to add the student list. And so I'll go ahead and I've switched to show the student name CSV I have here. And when I double click this, I will then have the names of the students available there. I will show how that text file looks right at the end. I just don't want to switch out of the menu or the screen I currently have, but it is literally just a column of the names. So I have, Sam, Dave, Katie, Bill, and I can switch between who I want to take the quiz at the time. And I have my default quiz here. I can open the settings, and you see I have option to those, like I mentioned before, the feature lock, the general options, the timing, and the scoring that I could set up. So I'll go ahead and just click start so you see how it looks like. Let's say for the multiple choice, I'll click start, and I'm prompted with multiple questions here. And so I go ahead and I click one and I confirm. Doesn't tell me the answer. Question 2 is trying to help me identify this structure. I don't know what that is. I'll click that, confirm. That looks like an oracle. And so on and so forth. I keep clicking, keep clicking. I can also skip. And when I feel I've done enough questions, click the X button. I'll be prompted with, are you sure you want to quit the quiz? And I'll click yes. So it'll tell me I have 1 correct, 4 incorrect. I've skipped 6. I've answered a total of 11 questions, and I can show the details here. And then I can export the results of these students. And you can see the student input, the ones they got right, ones they got wrong, and the time it took for them to answer the question. And so once you do that, you can bring up quiz mode again here. And it still has the same quiz that I've taken previously. Now let's go ahead and try and create that lab practical idea that I had mentioned before. I'm going to click customize, and I'll be prompted with this very similar menu to the visibility menu. I usually go ahead and I delete that first preset because sometimes it asks you to identify structures that you don't want identified. So I'm just going to go ahead and click the minus button here to delete. Are you sure you wish to remove the selected preset? Yes. So now I'll create my image first. I'll go ahead and use a pin again, and I'll just pin right there. And so once I do that, and I want to know what the structure is, I'll click on the structure in the menu, and you can see it highlights it for me. And whenever I press this plus sign, this structure will be added to the quiz. And so this annotation here won't be visible, and any custom annotations I made before will not be visible during the quiz. So that's where the annotations part might be more useful in feature lock rather than in quiz mode. But I've created my view here. I want it to look like this, and I've added the superior vena cava. And so I'll go ahead and I will add this view to my list of views here. Add to the quiz, name and ID, very similar to the preset, and there you go. So I've done that. I can go ahead and delete my pin here. If I click on this and I click the X button, oh, it's accidentally adding one for me. There we go. And now I want to pin a different structure. For example, during this lab practical, go to remember this is the coronary sinus. And I want it to be my second question. Click there. Let's see. I think that's it. So I want this specific view. I'm going to disable the question for the superior vena cava. I'm going to go ahead to my cardiac veins, and I'm going to add the coronary sinus. And then I could add this view to the quiz as my second preset. And so when I go here, I should see, if I switch between my presets, I should see which questions are going to be asked in those views. So I have for my first preset, superior vena cava, second preset, coronary sinus. And I'll just do one more really quickly, going along with this lab practical example. And I'll click here. I'll add a third pin. Let's just go ahead and delete all of them. And number 3, there you go. So that's what I want for my third view. And I will make sure that this is added as a question for this view. And so the aortic arch annotation is present, meaning I will be asking this question during my quiz. I'll add that as my third preset. You can change the order of these views. And so if you click off the randomize option in the settings, you'll be able to specify the order in which these questions are asked. And you can see I can switch between the views, and you'll see which questions will be prompted. And so it's good to double check because I forgot to turn off the question for the coronary sinus. And I'll go ahead and do that right now. And so now I'll have to add to the quiz again, and I'll replace my current view. And so now I have 3 questions, each per view. And once I've done that and I have my views, I'll go ahead and click continue. I'll rename this heart quiz. I already have my student list that's been added, and I can choose the type of quiz I want. So I had it recommended highlight for the lab practical portion. I'll go ahead and save it in my quiz history just to be very quick. And then I'll click finish. And then now that is the current quiz that pops up. I can go ahead and load it from my quiz history if I'd like. Heart quiz right there. And I apply. And if I press start, this is the view they want. So I'm asked to highlight what this is. And so we're going through a worksheet that you've given to your students. They can know what structure you're talking about, name that. They go to the next view. There you go. Name that. Go to the next view. Name that. And you're able to show the answer. So maybe I need to think of what I put exactly in my lab practical. Yeah. Maybe not highlight, something else where they can't just know the answer. But I hope that, got across the general gist of how to create your views, add your questions in those quiz mode view, and you could customize almost as much as you'd like for each of those views in your quiz.